My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
Summer is supposed to be an opportunity to slow down, but when you look at your kids, you can't help but notice that your kids are growing up fast. Help them build independence as they grow with Greenlight. Greenlight is a debit card and money app for families, where parents can keep an eye on kids' money habits while kids learn how to save, invest, and spend wisely. It's the easy, convenient way to raise financially smart kids. Get your first month free when you sign up at greenlight.com/Spotify.
I am sure you have heard of the power of being a better listener. Active listening, they say, is the key to better communication. If you can't explain to someone what they just told you, you aren't listening. If you're thinking about what you want to say while someone else is talking, you'll never experience the connection you can get by giving your true, undivided attention. But something we often don't hear about is the art of listening to ourselves. I recently did an episode on the weird, life-changing skills we aren't taught, and I didn't have time to talk about this topic, but it is certainly another one that I think is hugely important to the quality of your life. I'm a big fan of many of the Stoic and Buddhist principles that align directly with leading psychology when it comes to mindfulness, living a slower and deeper life based on principles. And similarly, I love all of Cal Newport's work on the deep life, slow productivity. His latest phrase is solitude deprivation, which basically means that we aren't spending enough time with ourselves thinking our own thoughts because we're so busy with so many demands on our attention, constantly jacked into work, email, social media, that we aren't slowing down and connecting to ourselves. And this is a topic that is a forever topic for me. So, hello and welcome to the Growth Mindset Psychology Podcast with me, Sam Webster, diving deep into the real science of self-improvement as always and uncovering the psychology behind building a life well lived. There's a concept called the Lindy principle, whereby the longer something has been true, the longer it will stay true. So a good book from 2,000 years ago that's still widely read today, it will probably still be read in 2,000 years. A book from last month on politics might not even be relevant in a month's time. In the same way, the longer a business has been successful, the more likely it will continue to be successful compared to a passing trend. Now, the art of connecting to yourself and living by truer principles of happiness rather than chasing trending desires is something that humans have apparently struggled with since recorded history. But it's only getting worse with our digital generation and the infinite content wheel. So today I'm actually going to play an old archived episode from 2019, which was a solo episode from me that I released called The Lost Art of Listening to Yourself. I go through the problems that we accrue with the fast paces of life and how we can become estranged from our own deeper wants and fail to understand or fulfill our own needs. And then using the principles of how we can learn to be better listeners to others, we can also become better listeners to ourselves. And there's of course so much advice that we should do more meditating and journaling, which is totally true. They are superb tools for listening to yourself. But I also accept that many people don't do them, and thus I only talk about specific habits that are immediately actionable and won't require some sudden giant amount of motivation or self-control to be able to action. The takeaways from this episode will be instantly implementable straight away the second the show ends. Also, an interesting fact that it was this episode that was the episode that became picked up by some of the wonderful higher powers that be and resulted in me doing a TEDx speech on the same topic in 2020. Sadly, the actual speech happened 1 week before COVID lockdowns, so it got a little bit lost in the news cycle at the time, but it was a great experience nonetheless. And the episode was also part of the first series I did on the show that was just me doing solo episodes, and I did a whole series on mental health. And it's funny that it was my first exploration of trying to do episodes without a guest. And now the show has changed so much that I do a lot more listening to myself and exploring the ideas within me that I have as a creator, as opposed to listening and exploring other people's ideas. So just a curious meta reflection on the whole topic of what the episode is on anyway. Now, as I said, this concept is a very Lindy concept. And if it was relevant 5 years ago when I first wrote it, it is only more relevant today. So on that, please enjoy the special episode from the archives. I want to talk to you about something that I think is really important and hasn't really been explained, along with all the other problems that we're talking about lately with technology taking over our lives and Facebook hate and email and all this crap. I want to talk about entertainment and edutainment as it is. So edutainment is educational entertainment, such as brilliant podcasts and YouTubes, such as the ones that I run that tell you how to live your life and make you happier and wiser and expand your horizons and make you a more wise person that should be living a happier life. And so, yes, I'm about to start hating on myself, which is good for other people, not me. Anyway, what I want to outline is the fact that since edutainment and just entertainment in general has become so accessible and cheap on our phones that we can pretty much endlessly fill our time with podcasts and such, we're starting to lose track of being able to listen to ourselves. So on my phone, within 2 or 3 minutes, I can go into my podcast app and download about 100 hours of content. And it literally takes me a few minutes, and I can literally just press play on it, and it'll just endlessly entertain me. So any small gap in stuff going on in my life, and I've got some moments where I'm not thinking about anything, I'm just like, oh, I can learn some more. Good. I'll stick a podcast on. So, if I'm cooking, if I'm walking somewhere, if I'm doing exercise, if I'm commuting, I'm on the tube, I can be listening to something and learning and expanding my knowledge. That's really useful. Great. Good one, society. I'm endlessly making myself wiser. Isn't that brilliant? And it is. I've really learned lots about the world. I've listened to loads of books. I've listened to loads of podcasts, and I've started my own podcast and listened to loads of really cool people telling me cool stuff. And that's been great. But then you do suddenly become unable to stop doing this. And I feel like you become a bit more weaker in your own mind. And I'll explain this further, but I wanted to just talk about why this has happened in general. So capitalism is there to basically sell you something that you feel you lack. And so generally we're starting to feel, well, if you're like an entrepreneur or a scientist, you want to be at the top of your game. You want to be learning as much as possible. And we're taught that we need to work harder and learn harder and spend every single of our moment optimizing our day. Capitalism's like, oh, cool. I can sell you audiobooks, or someone can start a podcast and they can make money out of advertising on it. And I can sell you this phone that'll let you access this thing all the time. And so we're suddenly able to buy a solution to what we think is our problem that we don't know enough. So we do, and we do spend money on trying to listen and optimize our time to the nth degree. That's kind of cool, apart from, as I said, we then become weaker in our minds, because every single moment where I'm like, oh, I don't know what to think, or, oh, my brain isn't doing anything, I'm like, oh, sweet. My brain's not doing anything. It can listen to a podcast and learn more. Great, optimizing my time. But that means every single time that my brain's like, oh, I'm not doing anything, I'm giving it something to do straight away. It's never doing anything for itself, which is really important, because that's when you become creative. That's when you have ideas. That's when you become someone that changes the world. So if you never let your brain do anything by itself, it's going to be quite useless. And that's huge. And we're kind of shutting ourselves off from the most important thing on the planet to you, which is yourself. And that's ridiculous. So we need to learn to not feel this slight worry every single moment that we're not doing something with our brain, and be like, oh, my brain's not doing something. I can listen to it and think about what I need to do today, and think about how I feel about life, or think about the challenges that I'm facing, and maybe come up with solutions to these problems. And you let your brain do other stuff. So if every time you go for a run, you're always listening to things, you're not coming up with ideas. But that's one of the most creative periods that you have, is because your brain kind of goes into this diffuse mode of thinking rather than focusing on what it's learning about. And then it makes connections between different things that are going on. And just weird stuff goes on in the background of your brain when you're doing exercise. So if you're always listening to podcasts, that's the problem. Essentially, what I'm saying is, even though I run a podcast, you shouldn't optimize your life to continuously listen to podcasts or continuously watch YouTube videos of stuff whilst you're cooking or anything. You need to actually have some time not learning, not entertaining yourself, just listening to yourself and being. So obviously there's meditation, which is spoken about a lot. It's like 10 or 20 minutes, but I'm thinking actually more than that. Sort of, if we have a curve, it'd be great if I had like a piece of paper with this written on it. If you spent no time learning about anything, God, I need to work this out. Right. So on your x-axis, you have the amount of time spent learning. On your y-axis, going up, you have the amount of time spent like being a useful human in the world and how many ideas that you have. So if you never spend any time learning, you're not going to have any ideas because you don't know anything. But if you spend 100% of your time learning, you're also not going to have any ideas because you're continuously learning and you don't have any time to think about what ideas this might give you or how you'd ever implement them. And you need to have somewhere between like 50 and 80% of your time learning, the rest of the time actually putting this information together in your own head and actually working out what it means, what you can do with this information and how you can be creative with it. Okay. And this was just talking about your spare time and things. In the whole of your life, you want to have more time to actually executing on those ideas or being an entrepreneur or having a job where you actually do stuff. That was not brilliantly explained, but I think it makes sense. As in, if you completely optimize all of your every second, you'll never do anything. And if you never do anything at all with your time, you won't do anything either. You need to actually find a balance that's right for you. And depending on what your situation is, this will be different. So sometimes you'll have a lot going on and actually you really need to spend more time with yourself thinking about what your problems are and how to deal with them. And sometimes, you might have just finished something, you want to be looking to new horizons, and perhaps you should spend a bit more time just learning about things and trying to think about stuff in completely different areas and listening to completely different people that you'd normally listen to on YouTube or podcasts and seeing what kind of opportunities there are in the world. And yeah, spending more time learning and less time wondering, just work it out for yourself. It's not like there is a exact prescribed diet of you must have exactly 75% of your time listening to podcasts whilst you're walking along and then 25% thinking about it. Like, take it as it comes and be realistic with it, but just stop every now and then. So if you've just listened to a podcast, press stop and think, cool, that was really interesting. What did I learn from that? How does this fit into my life? Rather than just leaving your phone to just go straight to the next podcast where you already start forgetting what the last one was you even listened to. And you just continuously carry on distracting your brain. So I think the most important thing is to just stop and take 5 minutes out and think about stuff and don't instantly try and distract yourself as soon as you feel it. And it's like I was saying, every time you feel this urge that you need to distract yourself, recognize that urge and be like, this is my brain feeling like it might need something to do. I'm going to let it do something with itself for a bit first and see what happens. You might initially think that you're going to waste your time not doing anything for 10 minutes. And you never know if you will come up with a huge idea, but sometimes you do and sometimes you don't. But you need to accept that and live with it and actually just be excited for the unknown rather than being like, well, I don't know what's going to happen. I won't do it. I'll just definitely entertain myself. Just accept that something cool could happen or something not.
I hope you're enjoying the episode so far. We are going to take a quick break to talk about some of the sponsors that help keep the show running. And then I'll be back to talk about my giant and unconventional strategy for building a better habit of listening to yourself and some ways that we can action it and practice it without it feeling like homework to try and carve some extra time to do these things we don't have time for. So stay tuned for that. Steve Jobs once famously said that design is not just what it looks like and feels like. Design is how it works. I've had my Manscaped Lawnmower 5.0 for a while now, and I have to say, it is one of the best designed things I've owned. Yes, it's beautiful. Yes, it feels really good to hold. but most importantly, it works so well. I've never been so consistently well shaved in my life because it's so enjoyable and easy to keep everything in trim. You can take it in the shower, it has a light to see what you're doing, the trimmer blades have skin-safe technology so you can feel confident putting it anywhere. So if you could take better care of your body and face hair situation, Manscaped are offering listeners of the show free international shipping and 20% off your order with promo code GROWTH at manscaped.com/growth. Even if you are a customer already, you can grab 20% off and free shipping at manscaped.com/growth. Links are in the description. This episode is sponsored by Factor because I love my food. And I also love putting time and effort into cooking delicious food. But I don't always have time. And on the nights that we don't have time to cook, what has become a bit of a default for us is often eating pizza. And that isn't ideal. I have been seeking something healthy and equally delicious, and Factor meals are a game changer. With over 35 different meals that can be prepared to suit your needs, so calorie smart or extra protein, vegan, as you wish. They have everything, and their fresh, never frozen meals are ready to eat in 2 minutes and approved by dietitians. So however busy you are, you can still enjoy nutritious, really, really good tasting food. So if you're interested, head to factormeals.com/growthmindset50, or you can use the code growthmindset50 to get 50% off your first box and 20% off your next month. That is code growthmindset50 at factormeals.com/growthmindset50.
Want a website with unmatched power, speed, and control? Try Bluehost Cloud, the new web hosting plan from Bluehost, built for WordPress creators by WordPress experts. With 100% uptime, incredible load times, and 24/7 WordPress priority support, your site will be lightning fast with global reach. And with Bluehost Cloud, your sites can handle surges in traffic no matter how big. Plus, you automatically get daily backups and world-class security. Get started now at bluehost.com.
And now this leads to my other really big tip, is that actually you should start talking to yourself, which sounds stupid and is the kind of thing that we're commonly told is something that crazy people do. But I've started doing it and it's really useful. It's really cool. So I'll be walking along or something and I'll try and ask myself a question of something that I've been doing that day. And then I'll tell myself the answer, or I'll be like, wow, I really don't know how to answer this. And I'll realize that my brain is actually not thinking very well about something. And I'll actually find the problems that I've got in the way that my brain is not organized right on a specific subject. And I'll try and actually seek proper truth and get better at something. And it really helps you organize your thoughts. Because if you can't explain something even to yourself, that's really a problem and is a sign that you need to think about something more. And so it's a really good way of organizing what's in your brain, because you think that you know things that actually you don't. And a lot of stuff is sort of in your own brain, like a difficult way. And it's just kind of left there as a package of like mess, and it's not been organized. And you think you sort of lie to yourself that, oh yeah, cool, I know that, I understood it. And you just sort of move on. You never really go back and try and stir the water and see if you really understood it. And you just feel confident in life. And then someone asks you and you're like, actually, I don't know what to say. I thought I understood this topic, but I don't. So if you ask yourself up front and spend time actually forcing yourself to recall it and explain it, you'll become much better at it. And I think it just helps also in general life, when you ever do want to explain anything to someone, much better if you're able to think about it logically and explain these things, which is something I've been quite bad about. And so it's been really useful practice for me to just say these things. And it's kind of a nice way, as I said, to actually listen to yourself and spend time doing these things, because if it forces you to actually properly think about something until the end of it. So if you just shut yourself off for 5 minutes after you've stopped listening to a podcast and try and ask yourself, oh, what did I learn from this podcast? You'll like think about it for 20 seconds, then your brain will go somewhere else and you'll be thinking about something else. Then you're like, oh, I'm bored. Oh, I'll just stick on another podcast. Whereas if you say, okay, what were the top 5 things I learned from this podcast? and then you actually speak them out loud, you don't stop thinking about it or think about something else. You're like, okay, the number one thing I learned was that I really need to spend less time listening to podcasts always. The number two thing I learned was I am actually bloody mental thinking that I'm going to have lots of ideas just by constantly listening to podcasts and never listening to myself. The number three thing, and so on. And you will actually get to the end of the thought that you are wanting to think, rather than your brain just going off in its own mess, not really doing much. So when you speak out loud, that's really huge. And it just gets you better at being eloquent and explaining yourself and just being a more useful human to other people when you're trying to give them advice, if you're actually able to say these things clearly. Yeah, I just found like a really useful life hack tip, whatever. I don't know if it's a hack. It's just a principle that I think you should adopt. And, you don't really need to be embarrassed about it. You see so many people walking along with headphones in and you don't really think anything about it anymore. They're just talking and they're by themselves. They're probably on the phone. And so you can just have a conversation with yourself. Doesn't matter if you're on the bus or anything. And no one's really going to judge you or look at you twice. And even when I do walk past people who are clearly crazy talking to themselves, I don't care about them anyway. So I don't think you've got anything to worry about. I kind of like talking to myself in the middle of crowds. And bonus points, if you do it on the tube or the underground or a system underneath the city that you live in, whatever you happen to call it, then actually you have no signal and you must be a crazy person talking to yourself. But I bet no one will look at you twice or even think about it. They'll just be like, yep, there's a guy on his phone, or a girl, or whatever, some beautiful human being. They'll just look at them and be like, oh, I'm jealous. And then they'll move on with their life. So don't have any shame. Just talk to yourself more, essentially, is my big principle on this. And it'll really benefit you and you'll become a really cool human being, I think. Essentially, why do you spend so much time listening to other people's thoughts and thinking other people's thoughts and not thinking your own and not listening to yourself? And I really want you to start listening to yourself more, because you're the number one most important human on the planet to yourself. And yet, if you're not spending any time listening to yourself, how are you going to do the most useful things for you? If you're constantly thinking other people's thoughts, that's really unhelpful. And these people don't know you. They don't know what your problems are. They're just telling you stuff that they think is right. They're not telling you what is right for you. You need to listen, number one, to yourself. Thus, after this podcast, after this YouTube, whatever, stop and tell yourself what you learned and enjoy spending some time with yourself. I am going to spend some time with myself. I'm going to do some cooking, talking to myself about what I'm going to be doing. I don't even know. I'm just going to start asking myself questions, and I hope that you do that too. Okay. Thank you very much for listening, and try not to listen quite so much. But if you're going to listen to someone, try and listen to me sometimes at least, because that would help. Cool. Take it easy, people.
Thank you so much for listening.
Go you!
Your consistency to reach the end of an episode is legendary.
My hero!
But when we learn things, it's important to reflect. So I politely invite you to take a pause, rifle through the biggest ideas you just heard. So here's your opportunity to hit pause and have a think. Okay, did you wrestle with some insights? Information doesn't stick when we race from one podcast to the next without using our brain to play with the knowledge. So here's another go at a pause. Alrighty, I'll let you off to continue with your life now. If you have any ideas or feedback for the show, I'm always interested to hear from you.
You're the best!
And other than that, please stay curious. Curious. Quote. Smiling for no reason.
Hello, I'm Vaskar Sadulu, and I host the How To Academy podcast, a bi-weekly show exploring big ideas to transform our lives and the world. Our guests include Arthur Brooks on careers, Ruby Wax on mental health, Gabor Mate on trauma, Nicole LePera on healing your relationships, and many more. You'll also hear from iconic artists, politicians, and activists, including Naomi Klein, Gordon Brown, Anna Funder, and a whole host of other very impressive people. That's the How To Academy podcast, available bi-weekly wherever you listen.